Muted. All right.
Got it. This meeting is recorded. Got
it. Thank you, Bobbi, for coming on, especially the fact that this is a vegan version, but you don't call it vegan. What do you call it? Like
I just call it Pasta Fazool. It's one of our favorites. Every time I make it, my husband absolutely thinks it's the greatest thing. And it's a pantry meal. I make it when I get home and I look around and I say, I don't feel like cooking. I want something quick and easy, but I want it to look and taste homemade. And that's why I make Pasta Fazool.
It's like, well, it is a simple dish. Let's see. In the chat, I've got ingredients, 2 cans of butter beans, a quart of veggie broth, a cup of bow tie macaroni, marjoram, rosemary, thyme, dried parsley, and then you can throw in some veggie crumbles. And then, and then, I mean, you also mentioned non-vegans can add other stuff, but I've found out that it has plenty of protein in it.
Yes, from
so
the
it's
beans.
Not like you feel like you need to add other stuff, but
correct, right? Just for flavor. If I add a few vegan crumbles, sometimes that kicks it up a notch. Any little thing that you add to it, it will kick it up a notch. Now, I'm from Pennsylvania originally, and normally these 2 little cans of beans in Pennsylvania, you can buy ginormous cans of beans readily at any supermarket. So this recipe has been brought down to a smaller, you serve 4 people with this. But chef, or if I was in your kitchen, I am used to cooking in huge pots of soup. So it would be a lot of fun to be able to make this in a big pot, and probably easy too.
Well, I usually do have quarts of veggie broth canned, but as I was mentioned before, I couldn't find any. So I broke out, I have like bags of veggie bits, mostly when I cut the ends off onions, those go in a bag in the freezer.
Absolutely.
And then I make veggie broth. So the pressure cooker just pressurized for that. And so.
Good. Well, the whole point is when you make this and you use your vegetable broth, okay, you already have the onion flavoring in it and a lot of other things, salt, onion, vegetables. So you don't need a lot more to add to it to make it flavorful. It's already going to be flavorful. The beans themselves, when I was a child, my mother used to make butter beans and we served it. She would pour a little milk in with the butter beans, and the juice was my favorite. So even with this, if you make Pasta Fazool, you could actually add some type of milk to it. Now we do non-dairy, so I would use organic soy, for example, as to make the broth a richer broth. But it's certainly not necessary. There are a lot of things that you can add to this soup to make it interesting and to personalize it for yourself.
Now, I've done it before where I'd cook like a potato and then mash the potato to thicken it. Or just you mash a couple of the beans and that thickens it if you want a thicker. But what else? What is something you wouldn't, that you've learned over the years that you made a mistake and put in there and you're like, oops? Did you ever have something?
Oh, well, I can't think of anything. Oopsie.
Oh, good.
I have a shelf full of herbs and spices. And yeah, there are things that I probably would not add to it. I don't know if I would add Italian seasoning to it, even though it's called Pasta Fazool. If you did, maybe you wouldn't add some of these other things to it, or maybe you'd add some oregano. I don't know. I never thought to do that. My mother's 3 choices for herbs were rosemary, marjoram, and thyme. And those are good standbys for if you're going to make a good flavorful soup.
Very savory.
Yes, without adding a lot of, some people don't like a lot of heat. We do. So I would probably be shaking in some Cholula or adding something else to my soup to kick it up a notch. But
Like
not
every
everybody
small
likes
pinch
that.
of cayenne powder. Yeah.
Yeah, a little pinch of this, a little pinch of that. Even a little turmeric wouldn't be bad. I've learned from my friend Deepa, how, you know, some Indian Nepalese cooking, and I use a lot of turmeric, curry powder, ginger, and garlic.
Mhm.
I don't think I would add ginger to this.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I noticed that this doesn't have garlic or onion, and I grew up
No.
learning that all Italian food, we had to have garlic and onion in it.
Well, and that's the other thing. I have some spices here. Here's my granulated onion,
Mhm.
and here's my garlic powder. Okay. So those are two options. My mother hated garlic. I did not learn how to make anything with garlic until I was in my 20s. So not everybody likes garlic. You know, we assume that, you know, everybody likes garlic, and they don't necessarily.
Yeah,
So-
I've even heard that the Italians don't use as much garlic as we think they do.
That
That's
doesn't,
because they just eat it raw to get it over with.
there you have it. Right. You might want to add a bay leaf.
Yeah.
You know, that's an option. So there are a lot of things, you know, this is a type of soup that you can personalize. You can add, I have some baby spinach here. And I found out that if I buy fresh, a lot of my stuff I end up throwing it away if I don't use it like I should. So if I buy frozen spinach or frozen collard greens or something like that, I can easily throw that into my soup as well.
You just throw it in at the end, so you still have the texture. Yeah.
Absolutely. This baby spinach takes 3 minutes to cook. So if you just toss it in at the very end, that's fine. Then we talked about another possible spice. I have Garam Masala, a great big huge container of it, Indian spice. Okay, and I mentioned on the website that if I need to want to kick it up a notch, I'll put a half a teaspoon of Garam Masala in it, and that will bring up some more flavors, make it a little bit more flavorful for those of us who like a lot of herbs and spices.
There you go.
Okay.
So like you said, you can personalize it. So
Absolutely. It's very easy to personalize. Another thing that I commonly use all the time is, as a vegan, whole food, plant-based vegan, I use miso, which is a soybean paste.
there you go.
And it's salty. So instead of adding salt to it, if I add a little miso to my soup, you have to add it at the end because it's a live culture and it's probiotic. So if you put it in your soup, you're not going to want to boil the soup after you put this in, or it'll kill
all
whatever.
the potential goodness. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So I very often add this to all my soups and stews, even if I'm serving it the second day. I'll make a little slurry of it with some hot water, dump it into my soup or stew or whatever, and it gives it a whole new flavor.
So that is a question. Is this better the second day?
I think most things are better the second day. But there's not a whole lot in this other than beans and noodles. Okay. But those noodles they're going to soften up a little bit. Okay. But they will absorb some flavor from the beans and from the spice that you add. We prefer all soups and stews.
So then if you're saving it for the next day, you'd make sure the noodles weren't, what do they call it? That they're al dente, that they're not overcooked.
When I was cooking huge pots of pasta fazool, which you're going to do, chef, I would cook my broth and my beans and put my herbs and spices in, and I would take my box of noodles, I would throw them in the pot, and I would turn the pot off.
Okay.
And they will cook on their own, and they won't be mushy. Any other way you do it, you will have mushy noodles. So that worked for me. I did that all the time.
Well, as long as it was boiling when you put the noodles in.
When it's boiling, you put the noodles in, you
And
mix
just
it
shut
on
it
in,
off.
shut it off.
Okay. So,
And in about an hour or two, your noodles are done anyway.
so
Okay.
all right, let's get cooking.
All right. Well,
Do you mind if I put onions in mine? Oh,
I don't.
okay,
I
let me
really
try it
don't
exactly
because
how you make it,
You
and I'll
you
see if
put
I need to add
you
flavor.
had, right. You had onions in your broth. Okay. So really, you have onion in it.
That's true.
Personally, I would probably add some onion as well, but you don't have to. Okay. Depends on what your flavor profile is. What you're gonna do is you're going to taste the soup when you're finished, okay, and see what else it needs. If it needs a little of this, if it needs a little of that, you put it in.
Oh, so that's the secret love, a little of this and a little of that.
That's correct. Yes. So this is the basic recipe. The rest of it, you can all personalize it with your own flavor profile. Ingeborg, you definitely sound like you are from a European country.
Yes.
You would probably use something, I don't know, maybe there's
Why do you put
spice
milk in there?
Oh, she's talking about making butter beans, or if you want to make the soup a little creamy.
Why do you put milk in it? I don't get that.
It's like,
Why?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that would be, my mother used to add milk to our butter beans when we were kids, and she would make a bowl of butter beans straight out of the can with some milk added, and it makes the broth really taste great. So if you wanted to, you could add some milk to it. You wouldn't want to curdle the milk. I use soy milk, but I would add that last after the soup is pretty much, it's really hot, and you might want to bring it up to almost a boil, but you don't have to add milk to it. It's just another option that you have. The options were the milk, the frozen spinach,
lots of different
additional
flavors.
herbs and spices, garam masala. There's all kinds of different things you can add.
Can you
to
use
it.
different type of noodles? Because I don't have your noodles available.
Well, the last time I made it, I had some wonderful chickpea farfalle. I guess that's what they call elbows, right? And I couldn't find them, so I purchased these Barilla at the local supermarket.
Yeah,
These were the only.
these are my preferred. Rotini.
There you go, rotini.
They got 3 different. They got a little spinach in one, a little, I don't know, probably beet flavor. I don't know. It's like tomato and spinach flavored noodles, but really, I don't think there's much flavor. It's mainly just the color. But
I agree. I bought these because I said bow ties in the recipe, but the whole idea with a
I couldn't
pantry
find bow
meal
ties.
is you could pull out your beans that you have in the cabinet, and you pull out whatever pasta you have. If I
Let me see what I can find. That looks interesting.
All right, she's gonna try to see you off the. So my question is there any other kinds of beans that you've made this with, like white northern or kidneys or any other beans?
Not this particular recipe.
All right.
This particular recipe is very specific to butter beans because of the flavor profile that
They quite literally only had 4 cans of butter beans on this shelf. I almost grabbed lima beans right next to it because they look similar.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, like I said, in Pennsylvania, you can buy these by the number 10 can. So around here, you get small cans. So what you're going to do is just add your broth. So I'm going to put my broth in here. I don't know if you can see it. I'm pouring the broth in the soup. I had this thing arranged. Maybe you can push that a little bit. There you go. All right, the broth is in. So now we can.
It's just enough for the amount of pasta you're making, right?
I believe so, but again, pastas are different. Last time I used the pasta, I used smaller bow ties, and they were made out of a different, I think they're chickpea. So always be prepared to add water to your pot if you need to. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is add the beans.
Do you have to drain the beans
Do not drain the beans.
or rinse them? No.
No, not this particular type of bean. What you want to do is you want to add all the juice with it. That's what gives it the flavor.
Yes. Switch my camera.
All right, now we're ready to turn on the pot. So I would put it, you can put it on high to get it to come to a boil, but then you have to watch it very carefully. Because once you add the bow ties, then you're going to want to bring it down to like a medium. Okay. We can actually add our spices at this point. So I say go easy on the spices until you are sure of what your flavor profile is. So I would add a good heaping half teaspoon of parsley. And a half a teaspoon of each of the other 3 herbs, the rosemary, thyme, and marjoram.
Yeah, I thought we would put the beans, if it's in a can, last. So
No.
it is mushy, but
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
don't have the flavor of the beans in the
Yeah.
pot. So I was thinking of that. But these butter beans don't really get that. I mean, they're soft, but they don't really break apart. They've got like that skin on them.
Yeah,
So it doesn't do a very good job. Unless you actually mush them, they don't really seem to fall apart when you're cooking. So
I already made mistake number 1. I turned the rear burner on, so I'll have to wait a minute till this comes to a boil. So I'm just mixing it around a little bit, and that's it. Okay, so we have everything in it other than the noodles.
and what
Then
do you
we'll-
tend to serve this with? Do you have a preferred drink or anything else?
Well, I have some different options here. I made as a whole food plant-based person, we want to get as many vegetables in as we possibly can. So yesterday I roasted up some red beets in the oven. I just merely, wrapped them and cleaned them, wrapped them in newspaper and roasted them at 400 degrees for,
So the whole thing, you didn't cut them up at all?
no, the whole beet.
Okay.
And I think I had them in there almost 2 hours because I forgot about them, but that was fine. Beets don't mind being forgotten. So I diced up some beets and I roasted up. I had some eggplant in the fridge and I had a zucchini and I had a pepper, a green pepper. And that recipe I found from the newspaper, and it's totally different than how I use it. But I diced those up and put them on parchment paper in the oven with the beets. I put the beets across the back of the oven and then the cookie sheet with parchment paper and diced up eggplant, pepper, quartered, and a zucchini. And I roasted those until they were done. And then I roasted them until they were finished. So
you said eggplant, zucchini, and
pepper, green pepper or red pepper. It called
like
for
a
red
bell pepper.
Bell pepper.
So was it the whole pepper, or did you like cut it in half?
I
or-
diced it up into about quarters or actually eighths.
Okay,
diced
so
it
all
up
those you
backwards.
chopped up to like bite-sized.
Yeah, pretty much so.
Okay.
That sounds
Roasted
like
that.
another show.
It is because it really is tasty.
Oh, that
When you
sounds
take it out,
phenomenal.
you slice up stuffed olives about 8 or 9 giant stuffed olives,
You just keep
and
getting more and more savory.
about a tablespoon of diced up peppers. The kind, I'm trying to think of the name. Just a minute, and I'll tell you.
Right.
Banana peppers.
Okay.
Banana peppers. Slice those up and then put in about a tablespoon or 2 of vinegar. Mix it all around and it is delicious.
Wow.
And it's wonderful if you serve it on a roll with some melted kind of cheese, if you can eat cheese, or I have like a vegan kind of a cheese I could use, but I don't even eat it that way. And I just mix the two together. I diced up the beets.
I
And
remember the first time I had a fresh beet, like, oh, that's so colorful
doesn't
and
that look good?
yeah, just like.
And a nice olive batard from the co-op.
There you go. I grew up, the only beets we had were the ones in the can. And so I absolutely abhorred, you couldn't have paid me to eat a beet. And then I had a lady come and cook with me from Ukraine, and we made Ukrainian Borscht, which she said, because our in-person cooking, we would cook enough for an average of 43 people. And so she figured out, she talked to her mom and she said, well, I need a bushel of beets. And I was like, I have no idea.
Bushel.
Of beets. Because we had to feed, 40 or 50 people.
Mhm.
And so that was the first time I ever had fresh beets. And I've been addicted ever since. Like,
Oh, they're
I see them at
so
the farmer's
good.
market, and they
Yes.
last. I mean, if you buy them,
Mhm.
they last longer than potatoes.
Right.
And so if you can figure out ways to cook them,
Oh.
oh man.
Well, now I made borscht for our Polish friends just last week, and they call it borscht in Poland.
Okay.
Borscht, I guess, in the rest of Europe. And we serve it with the dill, and that's another recipe that I make.
Oh yeah,
So
they
maybe
served
say
it with
that-
dill and a really strong sour cream. It was like a really strong flavored. That's how
Yeah.
she served it from Ukraine.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just use vegetable broth and put the beets in a blender and add a few other ingredients, secret ingredients, like a little vinegar or lemon juice.
In
A
her
little bit
case, she made us, we all had to cut the beets really, really small. So they were
Oh.
like little
Mhm.
cubes, but really teeny cubes. And that's how she cooked them.
Oh,
So this soup that we're doing right now, so we
Yeah.
put in the broth, we put in the beans, and we
Mhm.
put in the spices, right?
correct.
And we're bringing it to a boil.
And mine is now at a boil. So I'm going to toss in 1 cup of the farfalle or bow ties. So you can add whatever noodles that you wish to add to your soup.
And farfalle in Italian means butterflies.
Uh-huh, yes.
There you go.
And I'm going to turn the stove down now to medium. We want to keep it at a very low boil, very low.
Now you're trying to still have a lot of broth. So you don't want to have, you want to have extra water in it, right?
I'm not putting any extra water in there.
No,
Not
but
yet.
I mean, like if the recipe says, you need this much water, you want to have more liquid than it says for the pasta.
Oh, absolutely. I have half a pot full of, it's half full. So, and it looks like there's plenty of water in here. Or plenty of broth.
Mine
So
says
I would
1
just-
quart of water for each 4 ounces of pasta.
Well, there you have it.
So, but I always tend to put too little water and then it soaks up all the moisture.
Well, if there's not enough water in the soup for your taste, because some people like watery soup, some people like thick soup. My soup has a tendency to thicken as it cools down. So by tomorrow, if I have any of this left by tomorrow, it's going to be a thicker soup, in which case I would add a cup of miso broth, which I would make with this, toss it in, and it would have a slightly different flavor profile, but that's fine too. Not a
Did you
problem.
use the water on the of the can of the
Yeah.
beans you use or not?
Yes, always use, yes.
Yes?
Do not rinse the beans.
Okay.
Just dump the whole thing in there. That's
Have you
another
ever
reason.
Have you ever, when you did large quantities of this, did you cook the beans from scratch, or was always you just, because you said in Pennsylvania you could buy a number 10 can?
Oh, yes, you could buy a huge can of beans.
So,
So I would just dump the whole can of beans in.
so yeah, I wonder how it would taste different if it was the beans were cooked from scratch.
Yeah,
think
that's
it
what
tastes
I'm
any
kind
different.
of.
I would think that if you did it in a pressure cooker, you keep the juice. Do not rinse the bean juice,
Yeah.
because
You could
part of
also cook the beans with the spices, so it has extra flavor.
yeah, I've done that, but spices are a funny thing. If you add spices too soon to something, you lose the quality of the herb or the spice. So you have to be careful with that.
I'm turning.
you- I'm
Basically,
not,
I'm doing like what you said, where you just like you bring it to boil, put the noodles in, and then shut it off.
for a big pot, I won't do that. I mean, I'm going to cook my noodles till they're finished. But if you're making a huge pot, by nature of the beast, when you're making a huge pot, there's a lot of noodles in there. And you cook those noodles till they're finished, that soup takes a long time to cool down. Because of that time differential, your noodles get mushy. But that's when you're making a huge pot of soup. A smaller pot, it's not going to have the same, you're not going to have that problem. So that's why it's suggested if you're making an enormous pot of soup to serve a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you make the soup ahead of time, like let's say you make it in the morning and you're in the kitchen cooking it, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning and you're going to serve your people at noon or something like that, or even 10 o'clock. You could throw those noodles in, shut off your boiling pot, and at noon, it's all going to be ready.
Yeah, I've got over there the pressure cooker. It's a 12-quart pressure cooker, cooking
Right.
away for the big pot of it. But
Mhm.
that I'm cooking the beans from scratch. So
Well, if you cook the beans from scratch, keep the juice. Use that as part of your broth.
yeah, I mean, the part of the reason for that is I can store a lot more dried beans than I can canned beans. And
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'll even try that, chef. I'll try it with the dry. I have a ton of dried beans here. I could try it with dried white limas and see what happens.
but part of it is how quick this, you're basically throwing this together.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's. I
And, you
mean,
know, you look
probably
at-
this takes realistically what 15-20 minutes normally,
That's it.
because the pasta takes like 7 or 8 minutes.
That's it. The pasta takes 7 or 8 minutes, and here it says boil for 11 minutes. I
Okay.
didn't even time it, so I'm not sure. I usually taste the pasta. Some people like their pasta al dente. Other people like their pasta a little bit more cooked.
Mhm.
So I have a tendency to make mine not too al dente, because my husband likes things that are a little more on the mushy side. So
Yeah.
not too mushy. You have to make
I almost always do al dente because I always make a huge pot and I know I'm going to heat it up multiple times.
right.
And it'll progressively get more and more, well, cooked. So
Mhm.
if I do it al dente, it's a lot better that way. So,
Right.
so have you ever put beets in this soup? I was trying to think of something that wouldn't
It
be
would
good.
really-
No.
It would be good. I do a lot of things as a whole food plant-based person, like this salad, which is totally my own mix
Mhm.
of different things. So I add different ingredients to different things. And after a while, as a whole food, plant-based vegan, I have certain things that, my go-to, like quinoa. I've been starting to use quinoa a lot more in my soup. Or I'll use one potato. Instead, I used to use 6 or 8 potatoes. Every pot of soup had to have 6 or 8 potatoes in it. Now I can do it with one potato, but I have a lot of other things in
I mean, if we had the access to the, 2,000 plus varieties of potatoes they have in Peru, we might use more potatoes. But when you have access to like ones with no flavor.
Well, the purple potatoes are the healthiest.
Yeah.
Any vegetable that has that purple in it.
Have you ever had the
purple.
small purple potatoes? They're about this big, and they're just,
Yes.
It quite literally, like you taste it and it feels like you're getting life when you're eating it.
Absolutely.
You don't have to add flavors to it.
Yeah. Well, my husband loves it when I do them in the air fryer. I'll put all those little potatoes in the air fryer, give them a real quick spritz of extra virgin olive oil and a quick couple shakes of salt. And he just absolutely goes bonkers over those little potatoes.
I got an air fryer for the holidays and I can't get into it yet. My other people in my family love it. So far, I haven't got into it. So I'll keep trying because people brag about it. But
well, it's like a steamer, right?
Actually, an air fryer is like a convection oven. It's a mini convection oven. I had mine for 2 years and barely used it. Started using it about, maybe 8 months ago. And suddenly I developed this love affair with it. And I just absolutely put everything in there. We go to a Mexican store and buy a whole great big pile of tortillas for like $3.99. And I can put 4 of those in the air fryer for 10 minutes at 350, flip them once, and they're great. My husband eats them like they're potato chips. So there's a lot of things you can do in an air fryer, and it cooks a lot faster. French fries, I dice up potatoes all the time, golden Yukon Golds or whatever.
I think mine's ready.
Oh yeah, I think mine's just about ready.
Oh my goodness. I didn't open the pot. That's the hardest thing for me is to put a lid on a pot and not stir it.
Well, I didn't put a lid on mine. I don't know why. I always boil mine without a lid.
Yeah.
How's yours?
So it's just like, I based it on the smell. I was like, ooh, it smells like it's ready.
Right.
And so.
Well, let me taste one of my noodles and see if my noodle is done. My noodles look like they might be able to go a little longer.
Now my broth had a little bit of tomatoes in it. So that might change this.
Yeah, it could change it. I know one trick is certain beans, and I don't know which ones they are. If you're cooking beans from scratch, you're not supposed to add the tomato until you're finished cooking the beans, or they won't soften up.
Yeah, that's a good rule in a slow cooker in particular. You put the tomatoes in too early, those beans will never cook in a slow cooker.
It will never. That's
All right, I'm gonna hold this up to the camera. Look how pretty that is.
Wow.
That looks
Cool.
awesome.
It's like
It looks delicious. My noodles are not finished yet.
usually I don't put enough broth and it ends up being like completely, because I have a really I do like Bobbi said, I have a really thick pan. So I'll bring it up to a boil, add the pasta, and then shut it off and just let it cook in there. And then usually it absorbs all the moisture.
Oh.
Because I tend to underput the moisture in pasta. It's a problem I have. So
Well, my noodles are not finished yet, but I'm going to taste the broth and see if it needs to be tweaked.
I mean, I like mine really savory, so I'll definitely add some like cayenne and
Looks
Now,
like
do
a
you ever
one
add
pot to me.
pepper.
Tastes fine to me.
Yeah, actually, Mine tastes really good. I don't think I need to add anything.
No, I think it's good the way it is.
And my pressure cooker just finished making the
We can hear it.
big pot of beans. So now I can what do you call it? Start serving the big bunch for a lot of people. So all right. Does
Well,
anybody?
now, if you're going to make it with, if you're going to make it for a lot of people, you might want to consider throwing in some spinach or something, so they get, because when we feed a lot of people. I mean, I've been to a lot of different dinners and stuff where people bring stuff, and it's all pasta. And
Wouldn't you call this the one pot? This whole thing? I mean, it looks to me like we have a word for that. It's called Eintopf.
One pot.
Yeah, one pot cooking, because I mean, it's like a stew and it's very thick, and you know, that's one of those things I think it looks like to me.
yeah, it is. Mine's not real thick because my noodles aren't finished yet. Once the noodles are done, I think it'll be just perfect. And spinach, if you wanted to add spinach to it, which I may do, probably will do after this presentation. Because we want to get, you had started asking me, Chef, about what I was serving with the soup. The salad contains, we want to get as many vegetables as we can. So we've got all these vegetables in the salad, but I also use, we try to eat a cruciferous vegetable with every meal because it's anti-cancer. Okay. And all of us are
What do
worried
you
about.
mean by cruciferous?
Cruciferous is a type of something in the vegetable that fights cancer.
Okay.
Broccoli, cauliflower,
Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts.
Probably
right.
any kind of greens, right?
And not any kind of greens.
Okay.
Arugula, I believe, has it. And my good standby, Daikon Radish.
Ooh.
We love Daikon Radish, and our dogs go berserk over it. Absolutely love it. When I open this up, they come tearing into the kitchen because they immediately know
You must have them locked in another room because they didn't come.
they didn't come. I think my husband's taking care of them. Here's the Daikon Radish, okay?
Oh, that was a big one.
This is a big radish, and then we eat these with almost every meal or something cruciferous to fight that, we don't want to get cancer, right? And as we get older, those are things that older people really have to worry about, because cancer is so much more prevalent in older people as we lose our ability to fight any kind of disease. So, including cancer. So we'll have some of that with our meal as well.
All right. Thank
So
you.
now, I think we're about done. We're about finished. If you want to take a picture of this, or Deep is going to take a picture of this soup, Pasta Fazool. I have plenty of broth in mine, and again, it will thicken if it sits long enough. So I was going to give Deepa some, but she's not eating today. So I think I'm going to save it. My daughter's coming from New York.
Yeah, I usually fast the first couple days of every month.
Oh,
I fasted the last day of last month, and today's the second. So I could taste some of this. So I was just,
all right.
I have had it where I was fasting while I was on the cooking show before, and the point of it is to be conscious of, not just randomly throwing food in your mouth. For me, so.
Well, I actually, the whole reason why my husband and I are healthy plant-based is because of, and you talked about fasting, is that for religious purposes or health?
No, just that makes me feel better. I've been doing it so many years now that if I don't fast for a couple days, I start getting sick.
Oh, okay. Well, I lost 100 pounds and went off of 3 kinds of diabetic medications, a triple high blood pressure medication, and high cholesterol medication. And went on this whole food plant-based way of eating. And I thought, I'm never going to be able to do this. First month, all I ate was salad. And I said, I can't live this way.
So what was
And
a standard meal before you switched? Like meat and potatoes or macaroni and cheese?
Oh,
Mashed
yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
Yeah, everything. Ice cream. I was on so many different diets and lost some weight, and then I gained it all back again and more. And I knew
I quite literally think most of us are overweight, not because we eat too much, but because we're malnourished. We eat a lot of empty calories and don't get any nutrition.
that's true.
That's so right. That is exactly.
Very
I
true.
never believed that you call that malnutrition here with all the fat people.
Yeah, it's, that
Yeah.
overweightness is actually malnutrition.
It is.
Your people are hungry and they're trying to get that nutrition, and they keep eating because they're not getting enough nutrition.
Right.
And then,
Well,
you know, a
like
lot
salad.
of vegetables we get by look like vegetables, but have very little nutrition also. So it's like, if you buy a tomato that's been grown with a lot of chemicals, you have less nutrition. And so you have to eat a lot more of it. So even a vegetable. So, all right.
All
That was
right.
my soapbox. I'm off of it. So,
All right. Well, I'd like
Thank you. Thank you very much. I enjoyed that.
it's like, does anybody have any final questions? Yeah, this is nice, simple, throw it together, you know, like you said. It's very funny though, you said, when you don't feel like cooking, I'm gonna cook this.
Yeah, 'cause it's easy. It's very easy. You run in the house, open 2 cans of beans, dump a thing of broth in and bring it to a boil and throw in a few spices and you're in business.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you, Bobby. I really appreciate that. And I'd be interested in hearing more about the whole,
Oh, that beet salad, I want her to come back on and teach us how to make that.
Oh, all right. Be glad to do that. Maybe some homemade ketchup. I make a really good homemade ketchup. It tastes like the real thing, but it's way cheaper. And it's 2 minutes to make.
Oh,
2
really?
minutes.
Oh,
All
Absolutely.
right, let's
I'd
do
like
that.
to know. I'd like to know
All
that.
right. So let's see again.
thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.